Okay, let's dive right into this. Imagine looking down at your hands and instead of seeing human fingers holding a VR controller, you see a bioluminescent coral branch. You're not just holding a device anymore, your brain is literally starting to map those glowing branches as a part of your own physical body. Welcome to today's Explainer. For years, we've kind of just thought of virtual reality as this cool gaming platform, right? But today, we're exploring something infinitely more powerful. We're looking at how immersive tech has evolved from just giving us a neat 360-degree view to actually creating profound eco-embodiment. It's essentially hacking the human brain to bridge the gap between us and the global ecological crisis.
And this brings us to a really shocking reality from researchers over at Stanford. They actually put people inside the body of a piece of coral. And get this, not to watch coral die, but to actually be coral dying. It completely breaks the traditional nature documentary paradigm we're all used to. The Stanford Ocean Acidification Experience was designed to test a unique capability that literally nothing else in media possesses. VR can make you something you are not. Then they measured whether this huge perspective shift actually changed how people thought about ocean acidification. The answer? A resounding yes, and dramatically more than video did. It really forces us to ask, what happens when ecological destruction isn't just happening to them out there in the ocean, but is happening to you? To really understand why this works so well, we have to look at the difference between passive observation and inactive evidence. When you watch a standard nature documentary, even a beautiful 360-degree one, you're a tourist. You're a passive observer separated by a pane of glass. But when you embody a non-human avatar in VR with 6 degrees of freedom, meaning you can actually physically lean, duck, and move your body around, you're getting what scientists call inactive evidence. Your actual physical movements are mapped to the organism. Research consistently confirms that experiencing ecological destruction from inside the affected organism creates a significantly stronger emotional response than just watching equivalent documentary footage. It completely wipes out that psychological distance that usually lets us feel so detached from environmental threats.
And honestly, we desperately need to close that psychological distance right now because of one terrifying number, 30%. That is the massive increase in ocean acidity since the Industrial Revolution. By late 2025, scientists confirmed we literally crossed a planetary boundary. Just to put that in perspective, right before the Industrial Revolution, Earth's mean surface seawater pH was 8.2. By 2024, it had dropped to 8.04. The ocean's carbonate buffering capacity, basically its ability to absorb our CO2 emissions, is just being exhausted. But in VR, you don't just read these statistics on a page, you actively experience the ocean's chemistry changing around you. You actually watch the carbonate ions you need to build your own coral skeleton disappear as you slowly bleach and degrade.
Section 1. The science of what changes in your brain.
So how exactly does a computer simulation convince your central nervous system that you're a dying piece of coral or a burning tree? Well, it all comes down to this concept called eco-embodiment. It's a psychological phenomenon where your brain actually partially accepts a substituted, non-human body. You might remember the famous rubber hand illusion from the late 90s. That's where coordinated visual and physical touches made people actually feel like a fake rubber hand sitting on a desk was their own arm. Eco-embodiment is essentially the rubber hand illusion, but at scale. It leverages predictive coding. Your brain takes the synchronized visual and motor feedback of your VR avatar and updates its internal body model to minimize errors. It assigns real self-relevance to the avatar's experience, making the survival of that tree or coral feel personally vital to you.
Which brings us to a wildly fascinating concept called homuncular flexibility. We usually think of our brain's internal map of our body, the homunculus, as pretty static and strictly human-shaped. But it turns out, our neuroplasticity is incredibly flexible. Your cortex is fully capable of inhabiting and controlling novel, totally non-humanoid bodies. Your brain can adapt its body schema to include things like branches, roots, or fins. So, when your physical arms move in the real world and the virtual tree branches sway in perfect synchrony in the headset, your brain simply expands its definition of self to include the tree. It's kind of mind-blowing.
And this brain hack leads to some profound emotional shifts. A 2025 study on virtual tree embodiment revealed something super interesting. Simply feeling present in the VR forest wasn't the main driver of feeling connected to nature. The key mediator was actually compassion. When participants were embodied as a tree and then exposed to a threatening scenario, like a forest fire rushing toward them, it triggered strong edge emotions. But it wasn't just fear. Taking on the perspective of the organism in danger cultivated a deep, distinct compassion that significantly boosted their overall connectedness to nature.
But, the big question is, does it last? Well, when researchers compared a video control group to a VR coral embodiment group, the data clearly showed that users who experienced the VR embodiment retained significantly stronger pro-environmental attitudes, specifically on the affective connectedness to nature scale, a full week after taking off the headset. Now, whether these attitude shifts translate to lasting, scaled behavioral change over years, well, that remains an active and really exciting research question. But the initial retention of this emotional bond far outpaces traditional media.
Section 2. Multisensory VR and the next level. To push those retention boundaries even further, researchers are stepping into the realm of million-dollar lab setups that elevate the stakes to hack the brain's perception of reality even deeper. Adding synchronized physical stimuli completely short-circuits our disbelief. Think about thermomodalities, using automated infrared heat lamps to dramatically increase the sense of danger. Or aerodynamic stimuli, like fans targeting your upper body to give you the visceral sensation of being caught in a storm. They're even using olfactory cues, like literally holding the smell of burnt twigs and leaves under a participant's face to heighten empathy and cement the memory. Congruent stimulation across all these physical senses dramatically amplifies eco-consciousness, basically because your body's receiving danger signals from every single sense simultaneously. And the physiological data proves this absolutely works. During these multisensory tree embodiment sessions, participants wore electrodermal activity monitors to track their skin conductance, basically measuring how much they were sweating due to physical arousal. When the virtual forest fire approached and those heat lamps turned on, their physical arousal completely spiked. One participant summed it up perfectly, saying, "The fire really got real." Their conscious mind totally knew they were sitting in a lab, but their autonomic nervous system absolutely perceived the threat to their virtual tree body as a real physical danger. Section 3. Can you experience this on Quest 3 standalone? Okay, so all of this lab research is incredibly fascinating, but what does it actually mean for you sitting in your living room today? To give you an honest review of the landscape right now, yeah, there's definitely a gap between the lab and the living room. Today's home VR is heavily reliant on audiovisual 6DOF, meaning you get great visuals, spatial audio, and full movement tracking in standalone apps, but that's about it. Future consumer VR, which might integrate scent diffusers or thermal feedback natively, is definitely still years away from mainstream home integration. However, do not let the lack of a heat lamp discourage you. The standalone audiovisual experiences available today are surprisingly effective at creating that baseline body ownership and presence required to really shift your perspective.
So, how does this look in a real consumer application right now? Take the Explore app, developed by the Hydrus, which is an official UN program for the decade of ocean science. This is something you can literally go use today. It offers these 10 to 15-minute multiplayer underwater dives where you aren't just sitting there watching, you're actually performing inactive tasks. You measure coral richness, you tag and track manta rays, and you monitor sea surface temperatures yourself. And it works. In a 2026 study of undergraduate students using this exact app, researchers found that engaging in these specific embodied tasks significantly increased their self-reported motivation to protect the oceans and actually participate in conservation action.
When you step back and look at all this data together, from the high-tech Stanford labs all the way to consumer apps like Explore, a very clear picture emerges. The true killer app of VR isn't gaming, it's empathy. Researchers now have the hard, physiological, and psychological data to back the claim that presence in VR is our absolute most powerful tool for crossing the psychological distance of climate change. By allowing us to actually inhabit the vulnerable ecosystems we're impacting, VR completely bypasses our political and cognitive filters. It speaks directly to our innate sense of compassion and self-preservation.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this. Technology finally allows us to step outside our strictly human-centric view of the world, not just in thought, but in real physical sensation. And I want to leave you with a question to consider right now. If you could embody any non-human creature in VR for just 1 hour, what would it be? And do you honestly think it would change how you think about that species? Think about that for a second. Imagine the incredible impact if we all took that kind of journey. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.